total catastrophe. World War I, 18,000 Kiwis died. And then in 2 months, 9,000 Kiwis died of the flu. You can imagine what that was like. It was just like, and the population was only about 1 million. And their reaction was to do something brilliant. Their reaction was to think of their mokopuna and the rising generation, and to record what they knew and to pass it on, and to think of the future.
Fearing that tikanga Māori was going to be lost with so many deaths during the war and from the Spanish flu, Sir Apirana Ngata initiated the Dominion Museum Ethnological Expeditions in 1919. These expeditions spanned the North Island, documenting moments of cultural significance within the Māori community through film and photography.
They didn't have vaccinations then, and they didn't know how to deal with the pandemic. People just were dying everywhere, and particularly Māori, and particularly in these rural communities. Api saw some of the great tuhunga and people like that just being struck down by this virus. And he was the one that wrote to the Minister of Internal Affairs and said, we need to capture these things before they're lost. We're losing too many of our old people and our great experts. And the interesting thing is that my great-grandfather at that time was the acting director of the Dominion Museum. So he was somebody that was a very early pioneer in filmmaking. And when that Apirana's letter came through, he said, let's go for it, let's do it. So the expeditions began, and the first one was at home in Tūranganuiaki with the Hui Aroha.
The story of these expeditions are brought to life in the book Hei Taonga Mā Ngā Uri Whakatipu, Treasures for the Rising Generation.
There's lots of whakapapa in that book on all sides. That's the interesting thing about it. So you've got people that are descended from the tipun in the photos, writing about them and talking about them and listening to the tape, the wax cylinder recordings, watching the films, and it's been very emotional. It's beautiful.
The first of the expeditions was the Hui Aroha in Gisborne, making author and historian Dr. Monty Suter a perfect fit for the book.
I was approached by Dame Anne Salmon, who knows me from other projects that I've worked on. But I had just recently completed a book on Māori in the First World War, and one of the chapters included a piece about the Hui Aroha, which was held in Gisborne in 1919, and she thought, given that was the first expedition, and I having all the knowledge about it, I'd probably be the best person to write that chapter for the book, and I agreed.
The advertisement of the Hui Aroha, that was to be held at Park Race Course Te Hapara, was published in the Poverty Bay Herald in 1919. It was expected to be bigger than any Māori gathering since a visit of the Duke and Duchess of York in 1901.
The Hui Aroha was a planned welcome home to the Pioneer Battalion, the Māori Battalion it was called as well, in 1919, and originally it was to be the whole of the Pioneer Battalion, but on their way home on the boat, some elected to land the ship at Auckland, and so only those from the eastern Māori electorate, which was Bay of Plenty through to the bottom of Hawke's Bay, those were the ones that came here. And it was after 5 years of war. It was a welcome home to them and a commemoration of the fact that we had committed our boys to it, and a lot had died, so it was a tangi as well.
As a descendant of Sir Apirana Ngata, Dr. Wayne Ngata also became involved in the book through Dame Anne, a lecturer of his at Auckland University. Over the past decade, they have collaborated on research and writings into the tipuna of Te Rāwhiti.
I got involved with the book some 30 odd years ago with my own interest in writings of not just Apirana but others of his time and before that. It's definitely a personal interest, it's a whānau interest, it's an interest that's based on, well, how do you take those things that the likes of Apirana was involved with, the Rangihiro was involved with, and maintain not just the scholarship but the reasons, the purpose for doing that, to share knowledge.
When sifting through some of the material that was kept at Sir Apirana's home in Waiōmatatini, Ruatoria, Dr. Ngata found exactly what he was looking for.
The particular piece that I was interested in, am still interested in, and is part of the book, is around the terminology of whakapapa and how Apirana not just brings some clarity to it for our generation, but manages to tell stories of those that he worked with who were of another world.
And Dr. Ngata believes those stories and the preservation of Māori culture are just as important now.
From my point of view, even though Apirana makes a comment, not just in this, but in other writings of his, in Ngā Mōtiete, for instance, he does make the comment in the early part of last century that taonga, Māori culture, kōrero, was disappearing fast, and Māori had turned elsewhere and we're losing it. And so he was very fearful at that time. And I sort of make the point, if he was fearful then, we should be far more fearful now.
Natalie Robinson has a connection to Tairāwhiti through her descendants George Gillespie Boyd and Reria Tāwhina. But her connection to the book came through her passion for photography.
My involvement in the book came about through my interest as a photographer in producing new images in light of Ngāti Porou's Waipu Kokahuhua Agreement, a 100-year restoration vision for the river. I approached Dame Anne Sarmond about her great-grandfather James MacDonald's photographs of the Waipu, and I found convergence with his photography and my own. I was particularly interested in the Ngāti Porou perspective on the ethnographic expeditions rather than the institutional one.
The film captured during these expeditions over 100 years ago is still remarkably high quality, bringing these images to life.
Looking at the photographs, I was first struck by the light that touched our tipuna that I could be in presence with today. And so their mauri, their wairua shone through for me. And it compressed time and space. So I felt as if I could be there with our tipuna and with the people in Ngāti Porou who were participant at that time.
Other events featured are the 1920 Welcome to the Prince of Wales in Rotorua, communities along the Whanganui River 1921 and Tairāwhiti in 1923.
I love the fact that for each expedition, something different happened. You know, for the Hui Aroha, well, Monty was a no-brainer because, you know, who's the great authority on the battalion? He's from the Tairāwhiti, and so when he wrote that chapter, it was like, yeah, perfect. And for Jim, the great taonga that was taken back to Britain was this pou haki that was carved by Tēnā Waitere, his ancestor. So he talked about that, and that's gorgeous. For the Whanganui people, it was them talking about individual photos. And then with Tairāwhiti, you know, we've got Wayne and Natalie. Man, we were so lucky. It was just it was a joy to do.
Hei Taonga Mā Ngā Uri Whakatipu was published by Te Papa Press in November and is on sale at bookshops. Renee Lola here, Local Focus.